Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday Live. I'm joined by the beautiful Lewis Sparrow. Not just visually, but the swing as well. Really grateful for you coming in, especially for the live. So we have any swing coaching-based questions fire in, and Lewis will answer those, and I'll do my best to answer any of the equipment-based ones.
Yeah.
Really, really good week of golf this week.
Yeah. Rory.
Obviously Rory.
Back on top.
Thoughts on the swing changes he's making, because big talk about the swing changes.
Yeah, trying to get a little bit laid off at the top. I think it makes a lot of sense for him. Being laid off isn't necessarily a bad thing. Victor Hovland,
from
for
a golf
example.
swing point of view, obviously.
Yeah.
Don't want it in other walks of life.
Exactly. But I think, for him and the way he, used his lower half, and we were saying before this, he can get a little bit kind of like stuck and underneath. Yeah. And it's almost like sometimes he can't quite, and this sounds really weird, but he can't quite match up being laid across the line at the top. But you look at someone like Victor Hovland, and he absolutely rips it, gets a little bit across, has a slightly better rotation than Rory does.
But he's got a steeper plane, hasn't he? And so Rory's got that massive hip rotation that if he gets across, then the club's got to get round and under. Yeah. Hence he gets a bit underneath and off.
The big key is the rotation would get the club back in front of you earlier.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't rotate and the club drops too far behind you, that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah.
But like Hovland, he gets the club back in front pretty quick and really doesn't really see that much of a disadvantage for doing it. So.
I mean, it's interesting watching. I only saw, I'd been doing some bits. I've been out in the morning, then got back and watched the last few holes, and those, after the bit where his swing had gone a little bit off and maybe just lost a bit of concentration or just got out of sync. But those last few holes he played, literally, I mean, it's close to flawless swings, as you could see. But that new flight he's got of 18, certainly the second couple of days, that flatter flight.
Yeah. Which I think
it's a big change to his game.
Whenever we've seen Rory in like majors, and you just think like, just control the ball a little bit better, like flight it down, but he seems to just hit everything so high. And I always think that's kind of where maybe the slight major lacking performance could be a bit of a struggle. But yeah, flighting it flatter, it's usually a more consistent way to play, isn't it?
That and I think great to see how much that win and the Order of Merit win, and equaling Seve in particular, Monty was in earlier on talking to Colin about it, and he's saying how, seeing that emotion, the guy never played with Seve yet. Yeah. He cared so much about matching. I think that's why we all want Rory to do so well, because he shows it, and that was great to see.
Yeah,
and then with the girls, Charlie just came up short last night, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do when you get someone else that makes 5 birdies on the bounce? Was it on the back nine?
Yeah.
It's tough, isn't it? Wire to wire, we were saying, is so hard.
It's so hard. It's why you see it so rarely. Yeah. So rarely. But trending the right way.
I feel like she's had a pretty good year, though. To be fair, had quite a good year. So fingers crossed, gets a few more done.
Yeah. And then on to, I think it's the final one of the year for the girls this week coming up. So hopefully she can finish really strong there.
Yeah.
James has just dropped Kate off at the airport. Kate is off to Hong Kong. So it's the second major of the year for High Rocks, and an opportunity for the top 3 who aren't already qualified for the World Championships in Chicago in June, to qualify for that. So she'll be sitting around in the airport terminal for the next hour and a half or so, waiting to get on a very long flight. But live on YouTube on Friday, 10 a.m. on High Rock Station. So super proud of Kate and what she's been achieving. I think another chance for her to really show what she's got, which is an awful lot. So best of luck to Kate for that.
Yeah, good luck, Kate. You work unbelievably hard, harder than all of us, I think.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Absolutely. So great questions flying in.
Excellent.
So thank you again for all the questions. We will crack through these and see where we get to. So starting off with Alistair Cuthbertson, Mr. Cuthbertson Senior. Hi guys, looking forward to the show. Why does Tyrrell Hatton use regular/senior flex shafts? Well, he doesn't actually. So in the driver he's got, and we might have seen this question come in and just double check just to make absolutely certain, but he uses a TX shaft, so Tor X, which is stiffer than X in the driver. An X Flex in the fairways in an 80-odd gram shaft weight, and then Nippon Modus 120 X Flex in his irons. So they don't play as harsh. They're quite soft under the handle, but they're very tip stiff. But they are still an X Flex shaft. We were just musing that some of the shafts don't look as stiff when he breaks them.
Yeah, He made it look soft, for sure. He made it look soft, yeah.
But and he's got Be Nice on his glove. So
Yeah.
poor club didn't get nice treatment. But
He needs that reminder.
I think it's sometimes it's what can make someone, that feistiness, that firiness, really competitive.
Yeah, I
And
love
it.
it.
Always makes them.
I think he's absolutely brilliant. I think he's brilliant.
I think there comes a point where I don't mind seeing, like Tiger. He used to get mad at himself.
Yeah.
But then it would be over.
Yeah.
And it just. But hey, that might be the bit that is making him. He's one of the top players in the world at the moment, and maybe that fire in the belly. Off course, he's meant to be the most chilled out bloke.
Yeah.
But on course, maybe that's what gets him over the line.
I did a kind of a mental psychology course in lockdown. That was golf based, and this guy had a story of Darren Clarke's caddy, and basically whenever Darren Clarke would hit a bad shot, and he would walk off with his golf club and would basically walk to his next shot with his golf club in his hand, he told his caddy to stay exactly where he was, so he had to come back, put the club back in his bag, and say stop or finish or something like that, so he never took the frustration to the next shot. I thought that was always quite an interesting way of getting around it. So the caddy, he could get like
you're right if you've
200
got a
yards away.
caddy, or just leave your bag behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Walk back,
Just forget about it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Josh Gunton, I've seen a lot of pros with lead tape on their club heads and shafts, wondering what the purpose/benefits of this are. Now, perfect example here, proper player here, bit of lead tape on the back of the head. So just on that toe side there. Now, from a functional point of view, it's just mass. That's a couple of grams worth of tape on the toe. It isn't slowing the toe down and making it fade fast for this amount. It's just a little bit of weight to fine tune the timing. So swing weight essentially. So unless you're putting on an iron head, this is a 265 gram head weight. Unless you're putting 10 grams on that head, you're not even touching the surface of it changing any of the kind of rotational properties of the head. So it's just a bit of mass, and it's for feel and timing and strike, ultimately.
Made a huge difference for me. Huge difference.
Yeah, when the club head's going from 0 to, in your case, with a 7-iron about 92 miles an hour, it's going on a very long arc, and it's building up a lot of momentum, and actually that changes the timing a lot.
Yeah.
So club face control and shot patterns.
Yeah. Definitely. You just feel it more on the way down, can't you, really? In the most simple way ever. If some people just struggle to feel the head, whether they have a shaft that's too light or a head that's too light or whatever, more about than I do. But it was just, you just could get a better sense of it on the way down. Just felt as if you could feel and were more in tune with the club head.
And a lot of the tour pros will have lead tape on, because rather than build it internally, you can fine tune the lead tape more accurately. And once it's right, they just leave it. So that way you're not then having to rebuild it internally. So they don't care what it looks like, quite frankly. They just want it to work. So that's why you see some of them caked with lead tape. Like Billy Horschel's a prime example of it.
Yeah.
So him and Langer and those sort of tinkerers, you'll always see with a bit of lead tape on. Chris Burgess, I don't know what TYB stands for. I'm not down with the kids, but
neither do I.
I'm not going to make a guess of that. But I play 3-iron down to pitch wedge. What would you recommend swapping my 2-iron out for this winter? Great show, guys. As always, thank you very much. Depends on ball flight.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm not a hybrid player. I'm an iron player. I've never got on with hybrids.
Yeah, same.
But I played London Club last winter, and my driving iron over the water wasn't particularly fun. So I have put a 5-wood in. It's consistent. I've got to get used to seeing that much flight.
Yeah.
That's the bit I'm actually visually struggling with a little bit.
I think if you like a flatter flight, hybrids are always tricky, aren't they? And I used to have one that I just found that every hybrid I tried would just feel super upright. And this was back maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It'd be different now, but when you've got a longer iron, when you fitted me for my 2-iron, I would literally stand over it and just think, it almost feels like a 6-iron, but with 2-iron loft. And I just found that it was so much easier mentally for me to hit, rather than look down at this kind of bulky back that sits a bit upright. You kind of think, just feels a bit steery.
Try your best. Okay, right, yeah. Thank you for that. It's true, a 5-wood, it feels long to have that much loft on, but a hybrid will come out a little lower and allow you to play it a bit more iron-like than a fairway would. Fairway wood is to get maximised height. So if you're looking at, depending on what pitch of flight you're wanting, as a replacement for the 2-iron, if you wanted it a bit stronger, you can play the hybrid and stick it up in the air, go the lofted wood, I would say. Nigel Ayres, have a set of tailor-made Sim Max wedges. How do you identify the most appropriate specialist wedges? I've recently had a fitting, was advised to keep my set as my distances were good. So distances are important, obviously. Yep. Scoring zone, you want to know what you're going to hit. With the set wedges, you're not going to get as much tread on the face.
Yeah.
So less spin, and the grinds can be, the soles on those sort of heads can be a little bit wide, so it can be a bit clumsy. Identifying the best ones, the bounce is key, the shape of the sole, and between the different brands, so Vokeys have a lot of grinds, so you've got lots of options. But I would say, yeah, the how you deliver the head, whether you kind of crate shaft lean, whether you deliver the head underneath, you're using different parts of the sole, so the technique side of things is really important.
Yeah, and also, I guess outcome, like, you know, depending on the shots you like playing. You know, people might like having a lower lofted wedge with lots of bounce because they apply a lot of loft at the bottom, perhaps, maybe.
Your turf types.
Yeah.
That's the other bit where you play, and the turf and the, well, if you're in the UK, you're lucky to have sand in your bunker. Yeah, how soft the turf is and how soft the sand is will also impact it. So there isn't really a best wedge between the different brands, but there is a best sole shape for you, and so that would be that, and the loft gaps would be the key way to identify it. But fitting is the only way to really work that one out.
Yeah, yeah.
You must see some interesting wedge techniques.
Yeah, and
concepts on wedge techniques.
Yeah,
as well.
the concepts now. There's so many different types of concepts. Like, you know, there's guys in America that like having a super steep VSP, so vertical swing plane with a super steep
I'm glad you
angle
translated that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I've tried that over here, and I can't make that work for me. But then you've got almost like I think everybody knows Dan Grieve now, and how he seems a lot more kind of shallow through the ball and everything. And I think it's like anything in golf. There is no one way, and there is no, you know, you must do it by this method. It's basically in every aspect, even putting. You know, you might look down on a putter that you really like. I might look down on it and not be able to align the face or whatever. It's all completely individual, and I think that is true through short game all the way up to full swing. And
confidence. You know, short game's so key to find something that you feel you can get confident with, repeat. Yeah. If you can get a consistent strike. That's why I've struggled recently with the wet turf. I get handle lead, and you've helped me out with not getting my low point at the wrong place. Yeah. But once you start to strike it cleanly, the confidence shoots up, and then you're not thinking about fatting it. Yeah, which has been quite nice.
I think with good short game and a good soul, you can kind of hit it a bit heavy sometimes and get away with it. And I think depending on the person, like if you're +4, +5, you could make any technique work. But if you're a 20 handicapper just trying to shave a few shots off and get to a teen handicap, just find something that's super forgiving, super easy to repeat, and go that way. Yeah. There is no one.
And practice tends to help as well.
Yeah, it does help. Help, definitely. Yeah.
Kev T, evening Kev. Now playing a 5-wood after last week's demo and hitting greens on long par 4 with height. Thanks, brilliant. Great to hear, and keep hitting those greens. Tony Bythway, hi guys. Recommendations for a hybrid shaft that is similar to a steel fibre 110 in feel, please. And what weight would you go for in a 4 hybrid to blend? So the steel fibre 110 is 110 grams, as one would surmise from the notification on it. Quite a stout feel. The steel fibres are structurally pretty rigid, so if you're wanting something to feel similar, it's got to be quite a stable, stiff tip, stable profile. I would probably go around the 85 to 90 gram area, I would say, for a 4 hybrid, maybe more around the 85 gram area. You can actually go into the I-80. The steel fibre shaft in a hybrid can work quite well. Will feel pretty firm. Otherwise, Oban, the Devotion 85 is not a bad one for that. Stout feel, but keeps the weight in sort of that middle ground. But there are a lot of shafts in that weight bracket. Pretty much 90% of hybrid shafts are offered as an 85 gram option. But yeah, I think the Ventus Blue 85 would also be a solid option too.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, I completely agree. Yeah.
So this is one for you to lead on, because I'm not going to go at a swing drill. Nigel Ayres again. WHI, so handicap index 21.8, 3-year senior golfer, tend to slice my woods, including driver, and come over the top. What's the best drill to help cure this?
So the slice is actually one of the easiest things to fix, I think. And first of all, if you're struggling to square the face up, inevitably coming more over the top will effectively give you more chance. So say, for example, if you play 9 holes, not even play for 2 months, but if you play 9 holes and you miss target consistently to the right, you'll naturally do things like move the ball further up in your stance, aim more left, and then you'll start trying to throw the club out in front, because at least that would help the club move more across, thinking it would negate the right miss. But actually, a lot of the time, if you manage to get the face square, lived with pulling it for a week in practice, suddenly then getting to the fundamentals of why you're slicing it in terms of the mechanical aspect, it's so easy to fix. Honestly, I think people can go from hitting a 30, 40 yard slice to, it doesn't have to be a draw, but just a controlled little fade, in honestly about an hour if you know what to fix. But I would always go around the route of try and square the face up first, pull it, only slightly, pull it, you'll find a bit more yardage, and then you won't have to react and come over the top. And then it's for, I think, in terms of mechanically, because that's, going through a bit of a process, but if the chest is ahead, so say for example you've got your driver, and inevitably the ball goes further up in the stance, a lot of the people almost move their chest and point their sternum at that ball position, which is quite heavily far forward. So there's 2 things. A, it gets the chest now ahead of, closer to target than your lower half, not great from a sequencing aspect. But B, really simply, it will align the shoulders quite heavily to the left. But it's always this ball goes up, people kind of follow it with their chest. And it's this tricky part where you've got to learn to keep the posture, tilted, and so that helps the low point come back, but just place the ball further forward and do that instead of going like this and moving the chest over. That would be the first place to start.
Probably golf is counterintuitive, isn't it? If the ball's going left, you need to swing to the left to square it up, and if it's going right, you need to swing to the right.
Yeah.
Because if you swing more left, you're coming across it more.
Yeah.
But it seems so wrong to do that. I think that's the tough bit.
It always seems wrong, and if changing the club path and changing the swing plane doesn't help the slice, it's because it's more face related rather than path related. Right. Because there's aspects where the path is reactive to face, and there's other aspects where the face is reactive to path. People who have this maybe path of, I had a guy in last week, I think was maybe 13 left in swing direction. Yeah. And then when we got him hitting it straighter, in terms of starting it straighter, we had to teach him how to unload the head a bit better, because he's so used to swinging 11 or 12 or 13 left that you can't feel any release because you'd hit it 60 yards left. So he just developed this big chicken wing, but that was his way of making it come back towards target. Not the dream, but it's always little matchups like that, which are the key. I hope that answered that question. That was a bit
I'm sure.
roundabout, but
if not, let us know. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, sure.
Moves, thanks for the advice last week, Simon, on shaft EI to try since my Denali black isn't squaring up unless I slow swing. Found a great deal on a TB and it arrives this week. Well, let us know how it goes. Hope it goes well. Bama number 1. Good evening, gents. Good evening to you too. Looking forward to listening to all your answers. Great job as always. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Langford. Evening. I'm just wondering if you've heard whether TaylorMade are releasing a new driver in the forthcoming months. Great content and look forward to 6 p.m. every Monday. It's very kind comments.
Yeah, they are very nice people.
They are going to be releasing woods in the new year. I'm not allowed to say anything about them until mid-January. So there's a current embargo on talking about the new product from all the brands at the moment. So sadly, I can't tell you anything about them. I have seen them, but I will have to keep my lips sealed until January, I'm afraid. But yes, there's going to be a lot of new product. Ping, Titleist. Titleist actually not for woods and things, but so Ping, Callaway, TaylorMade, Cobra, Strixon. Yeah, they're all bringing out product in the new year, as with every year. So there'll be plenty. Wilson as well. We will be getting the Wilson product in because they have just done a Club Connect sleeve. So
they have. Good.
We can now properly test the woods, and the woods are good.
Yeah. They are
good. We've seen them again. Good. Can't talk about them.
No.
But yeah,
exciting.
impressed.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, impressed.
Good.
Looking forward to getting those in. Mark Sefton, even all, can you recommend, and that is absolute, can you recommend a good 3-wood swing weight to match irons running from D2.5 to D3 and a good dead weight to couple to irons with a 115 gram shaft? Thanks for showing your wealth of knowledge. So this has got to be a complete guess. But in theory, if you're D2.5, D3 on the irons, fairway wood around D2, D2.5 often, not always, but often matches up. And if you're 115 grams on the iron shafts, I mean, unfortunately, the answer could be anything from 65 to 80 grams because it depends on how you match up your wood swing, but probably nearer the 70 to 75 gram end of things for a fairway wood. But disclaimer, that's a complete guess. It might not work. But I hope that helps anyway. Steve Darrington, hey legends, God, look at that.
Wow.
We've gone up in the world.
What
your
lovely
influence.
people
Clearly
here on a
your
Monday
influence.
night. Oh, well.
We'll see what happens when Stuart comes back, what we get called.
True, yeah, all the
Statler
abuse,
and
all the
Waldorf,
abuse
I think it
carries
was,
on.
wasn't it? Can a driver set up too light cause an early release or slower swing speed? And if so, what kind of change to setup might help? Any shaft suggestions? So this is a really interesting one because from coach's side, you're always looking at the swing, at what's going on, and quite rightly looking to what can I do with the swing. And from a club point of view, we're looking at how does the club influence what the player's doing. Too heavy can be prohibitive, but also so can too light. So if someone's not got enough weight to use, you can't actually build speed with it. So you end up overpowering it, kind of losing the club through impact, and then having to back off to try and match up the timing. Can a driver set up too light cause an early release? Yes, because as you put energy into the handle, you can lose the club head end. It doesn't necessarily create a cast, but you will sort of lose the club through impact. So change the setup. It could be a heavier swing weight, could just be increasing head weight slightly, try 2 or 3 grams, or the dead weight of the club's too light, or the balance point, the shaft's too near the handle. So there are a few areas, but the easiest ones to look at would be increasing head weight by a couple of grams and seeing if that helps to drop the club head in and create that kind of late hit. If you still can't do that, then try upping the total weight of the shaft by 5 to 10 grams. That's generally a good kind of start point to giving yourself a little bit more to hit against and to syncing up. Essentially, if you can match the weight to you, then the club falls in the plane, whichever swing plane you swing on, it will match the plane more readily, because if it gets too heavy, it can drop under, or you've got to throw it to get it back online. If it goes light, then it just doesn't drop in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's what we did with my driver, wasn't it, when I first came here?
Yeah.
And the change was immediate, literally immediate. Going
Still
from
remember the look on your face. It's great.
it was wild,
Yeah.
absolutely wild.
Yeah. But it's the kind of thing that you can be working on something with your swing and find it really hard to match up.
Yeah.
And be like bang your head against a brick wall. We often see people coming on trying to chap on Saturday afternoon. Lovely gentleman came in, left-hander, was playing fairly heavy clubs and trying to get shaft lean. He was sort of dumping out behind the ball.
Yeah.
And we went from a Project X 5.5, I think 5055, down to a Modus 105. So it took about 10, 12 grams out the shaft, but could then get that shaft lead to create the late hit, to create the downward strike, rather than having to fetch at it. And so equipment can help you achieve with your coach what you're both trying to work on.
Yeah, certainly if the club is too heavy, you know, the club wins the armrest on the way down and pulls you into spots you don't want to be. And if it is too heavy for the force you're putting through the handle, you know, you can try and move as well as you like. But if the club is so heavy, it's like trying to bicep curl 20 kilograms and you really max out at 10. You know, it's just hard to really move it.
Yeah. Matt M had a good first session with Lewis on Thursday last week.
Oh, brilliant.
Well, that's lucky, isn't it?
Brilliant.
I can report that I didn't win the turkey on Saturday in the competition. However, some decent strikes and good signs already. Apologies again about the small dent in the wall.
Haven't told you about that yet. Haven't told you about that.
It's a small one. Oh,
it's just a small one. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
You should see some of the dents and there's a hole in the ceiling from where a head came off. I mean, Joseph Wortley, thoughts on the new 2024 Mitsubishi Diamana whiteboard? Any pros using it? Pros-wise, I'm not 100% certain if they have got them into the bag yet. The new whiteboard, it's really interesting how that shaft progresses through the flexes. So whiteboard, very stiff tip, low torque, designed for lower launch, lower spin. Relative to previous models, it's less tip heavy. But what they've really done is the tip's very, very stiff through all the flex. So if you take the 53, 63, 73, is you go from the regular or the stiff through to the X and the TX. The tip stays actually very similar, but it's the mid and the butt section that ramp up in terms of stiffness. So balance point less tip heavy, but really stable, very stable on the tip on all flexes, really stable through the mid and the upper section on the stiffer flexes, and therefore place slightly higher balance on the stiffer flexes as well. But very stable shafts. We've had some great results with them.
Excellent.
Alex N, evening gents. I recently moved from 95 gram steel to 65 gram graphite. That's quite a big change. With 60 gram grips, okay, on my irons. Did adjust for swing weight. What potential negatives should I look out for while I test? So this goes back to what we were saying a moment ago about having enough to hit against.
Yeah.
I think if you've lost 30% of the shaft weight, then it will in theory be easier to swing, so less effort.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself having to rein it back, having to almost sort of put the club on the back of the ball rather than keep accelerating through, and then you've probably gone a little bit too light. So and you might find that you'll find the dispersion pattern, it's like to kind of over adjust. And you may see that in the coaching bay. If someone's got something very light, you can wrap the toe over or really overwork the face open and close, so the dispersion can start to kind of military golf a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I guess if it's got almost a bit more of a stable movement through the downswing, i.e. not too heavy, not too light, but if it is just in the middle, it makes it so much easier to do the same thing over and over again, because you get a really good sense of, like I said earlier, when we did my lead tape and the driver, like I went from, the driver was especially going from, I think I told you I could block, I could turn one over, or I could nail it 320. I was like, I just want to be somewhere in the middle. And then you change the weight of the shaft, and I could suddenly, it was almost like the weight helped it stay on plane on its own, rather than dumping
kind of
under, turning it over.
It's kind of the Goldilocks thing of not too hot, not too cold, but just right.
Exactly. It's why it's
the
so
simpler it
difficult,
feels to deliver the club head, the better the setup.
Yeah.
That's really, the better the match the club, whether your swing shape will determine shot shape, swing lines, but strike will become more consistent. You will be able to stay more balanced because you're not having to fight the club.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Niels Axelson, love to hear from you, Niels. Good evening. Quite late where you are, I think, by now. This year, my son borrowed a TaylorMade Sim. I thought he was going to say your clubs and broke it. Borrowed a TaylorMade Sim UDI 2-iron Hazda 6.0 80 gram. He had to give it back. His 7-iron swing speed's around 92 to 94. Strong boy.
Decent.
Yeah. What should he be looking at from recent generations of clubs? So from a if you mean from a driving iron, do you mean from a driving iron point of view? Just let me know which club in particular, and we'll go through a few, and I will loop back to that, just so I don't want to answer the wrong bit. If it's driving irons, then it depends how he's developing his speed. He could be a real kind of snap speed and not need heavy, and that's when the hazardous shafts are good because they're higher balance. Or if he's a big strong lad and really pulls on it, then normally going into a heavier shaft, into a steel can work. But that's specifically for driving irons, but let me know which bit of the bag and I will come back and I will answer that when we get to that. Move's question about shaft being tipped an inch. Will it affect the EI profile of the shaft and kick, or just stiffen up the launch and spin? Technically it will, because technically you're shifting where the bend point is by shortening the tip end. However, the biggest effect is it's stiffening the tip up. It firms the bottom end a little bit, unless you're using a Velocore, then it softens it. And you're therefore reducing spin and launch a fraction, and it'll feel a bit tighter. But it won't really change to swing the balance point or the profile of the shaft. You're just shortening parallel section at the bottom. The caveat about the Velocores is all the stable materials in the tip. So if you're shortening the tip, you're taking some of it out. So you're actually softening the tip a little bit. So some shafts, you can tip it and make it softer.
Huh.
Just because golf wasn't complicated
enough. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make things more challenging. Yeah.
Joseph Worthy, I've got 6X driver shaft, but like the feeling of a 7X. Can I add lead tape to areas of the shaft? Where would you place it? I mean, in theory you can. It's just mass. If you're going to add it anywhere, add it right down the middle of the back of the shaft, so it's as neutrally positioned as possible. I mean, I guess, it is just a bit of mass at that point. So the 7X will feel more stable because there's more material. So you won't replicate the stability of the shaft, but you will give it more weight. and it might
That
fall
makes
off.
sense.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Someone said on the inside of the shaft that you might struggle to do that, especially on a graphite. The middle's very, very thin. And that's from Tom. Tom said, Niels, get the same. I'm fast, but a 9 handicap. Wish I had everything softer / lighter. There's a bit of a conversation going on between Tom, Joseph, and Neil, or Tom and Joseph in particular. But so some of them put, as Tom said, a bit of lead tape at the bottom of the grip. You're normally looking at a couple of grams. That's it. When you install it right here at the bottom of the grip, it has the least effect on the way the club swings because it's right by the handle. So unless you're putting 7 or more than 5 or 6 grams on, you could argue that's just like using a slightly different grip weight.
Gotcha.
So that's why up there has the least effect, and why down the bottom has the most effect because it's the most momentum builder.
Yeah.
So that's why they tend to use it there. Horse Racing Legends, great show as always. Have you both tried the Wilson Staff CB 2024 irons? Any good? Yes.
I have. Yeah, I played. I played the 5-iron. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the CB.
Yeah.
Wilson's irons clubs have been very good for a while. I think they as a brand haven't. They're kind of almost coming back into it, which sounds odd to say for a brand that big. But
No, I mean, I got sponsored by them back in March, and before that, I was a bit unsure as to whether I would join or not, because when you think of Wilson, you kind of think, well, I wrongly thought, package set at my old golf club, it would be something that would be in the pro shop, but the quality of the new woods and the irons, like I love my irons. I've got the blades, but
very pretty, yeah.
they're just incredible. But the new woods that are coming out next year are so much better.
Yeah.
So it's like they've had a bit of a revamp, but it does seem weird for a company that's as big as Wilson to have a revamp.
But I think you say Amos Sports that are the owner of Wilson, but they're so big in baseball, in basketball, so there's a huge amount of resource that goes into them, and proportionally golf has had less over the last 5-10 years. Yeah. But that is changing, and again, can't talk about it yet, but I have hit them and I'm impressed by them. Yeah. I think I'm very, very pleased we will have the Club Connect sleeve to be able to do a proper fitting with them like we do with all the other brands.
Yeah.
I think they're definitely pushing forward. Irons have been good. One of their head weights is quite heavy, which is a little prohibitive, much like with Mura with some of theirs, with the Dynaforge, the more kind of slightly more forgiving, more distance-based club head.
Yeah.
But the blades, they have a slightly more rounded sole than some on the CBs they have done in the past. But really classic shape, well made, good soft forging.
Yeah.
No, nice. Lee Roberts, evening guys. Have big plans to work on the swing in the winter. Been recently fit by yourselves. How much impact in change of delivery and technique would have on the current fit, e.g. shaft, loft, lie? So loft and lie is the main area. I think it depends how much, like for example, you might be working on someone over the winter. It depends how much you're changing the delivery.
Yeah.
That's really the answer to answer that question.
Yeah. Swing plane is probably one of the biggest numbers that's going to change. Dynamic loft could change.
Yeah.
So, if you're using something that's quite strongly lofted and then you start, taking a bit of loft off through better impact positions, that could be a bit of a tricky one. But I think swing plane is probably the most difficult one. Like, there's been so many times when someone's a swing plane up in the mid-70s, mid-80s, and then you suddenly get them down at 62, 63 for their 9-iron.
Shallowing out.
Yeah, shallowing it out, and suddenly they can't help but draw it. But when they're up at kind of early 80s or late 70s swing plane, they can't square the blade up. So the fitter, none of you guys, would make it more and more upright. But actually, I feel like that's probably the biggest change you could make.
Yeah, it's going to be the biggest change. I think irons are quite easy. Most of the time you can adjust the loft to the lie. You may find a very slight swing weight change, potentially because if the patterns have changed a little bit, then how you use the mass in the head changes a little bit. Yeah. So that can happen. If you're on a better line technique-wise, you can be more efficient. So without actually hitting it harder, you're putting more energy into the club because everything's online better. So you're only working through a more uniform plane rather than having to reroute. Yeah. So that's where you'll often find moving the swing weight a hair heavier is the most likely outcome, and as you said, maybe a loft lie adjustment. Yeah. Drivers can be interesting because if you've been fit around a low spin head because you're flaring one up, and then you change the pattern and you take a load of spin off, that's where it can get a little complicated. But driver's the most sensitive one to that. Most of the rest of the bag you can still make work. Yeah. Good question though. Mr. Hopkins, Alan Hopkins, good to see you Friday, Alan, and Elaine. What effect does having a larger grip, maybe not quite jumbo, have on ability to release the head? Onset of the depoitons, if that's pronounced correctly, that's the when your fingers kind of pull in. Dupotrons, there we go. And think you're moving to larger grips. Well, certainly if you're struggling to close the hand down, or you want to reduce a bit of grip pressure requirement, definitely larger grip will help with that.
Yeah.
Grip weight's a key thing to be conscious of, is that if you've got a club that you like and that swings well and plays well, if you go to a bigger grip and it goes much heavier, then you lose the balance of the club.
Could feel completely different, couldn't it? Could feel completely different.
So that's where, and obviously you go a lot bigger. So some players, so for example, if I can borrow that quickly, the way I play, I use my fingers to square the face. So if I get a little out of sync, I use my hands to rotate and square. And so if you do that, that's when the bigger grip might mean you struggle to square the face up.
Yeah.
But if it means, that might just mean aiming a little bit left.
Yeah.
Because if you're taking strain, discomfort off your hands, golf can be more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two sides to it, really.
Sounds like that might just need to happen anyway, and work your way around it.
Yeah.
By changing bits of the club.
Still a good ball striker when he gets it going, is Alan. Likes his classic clubs. Andrew Spence, good evening. Simon fitted me for T150 irons in spring, and so impressed. Great news.
Good.
When's best time to come for a driver woods fitting? Thinking January. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Interesting on this. We've been asked this a couple of times. From a product point of view, the very end of the year can be a little interesting because they kind of go through cycles, and some of them cycle out with new products launching in Jan, Feb. So from a fullest amount of product on offer, early Feb's a good time. However, back end of the year, we've been working with the products for a year, so we know them inside out by the back end of the year. So we actually potentially can do a better fit the second half of the year because we know all the little nuances on them. We've seen different swing styles and players come through, so we know which heads are better at the heel or the toe. So from a product availability point of view, first half of the year is great. Actually, the later in the year you can do it, fitters might do a slightly better job because we've had so much more experience with them. So it's kind of an interesting one. That. Probably not the same for lessons, is it?
No, not quite. Not quite. Winter's always good for lessons. Winter's always good. That is interesting for clubs, though.
Yeah, the more you use them, you start to see little nuances. So like we start to see how good certain heads are out of a heel strike or for a particular delivery pattern that you only learn through seeing different swings coming through. You start to see trends appearing. It's one thing, you or I swinging with very neutral deliveries, but that doesn't give us the whole picture of what an average player does. And you definitely see patterns of certain heads being really good for certain essentially missed patterns, or for a shallower delivery versus a steeper delivery. It's interesting. Not always what you might think.
No.
Lee Roberts, any inside knowledge on any plans for a new Titleist CB MB range? Love the show. The answer on that is, I'm actually seeing Titleist on Wednesday. Again, not that I'll be able to say anything about it until the new year, but there will inevitably be, it's been 3 years or so now, there will inevitably be some kind of product update in the relatively near future, whether it's this year or the following year when the whole iron range will cycle. But I'd imagine, it's total guess this, I'd imagine sooner rather than later, I would say, because they don't like to leave the cycles too long. Chris Burgess, for both of you, which is the best way to hit a draw and a fade? Oh, you first.
Best way to hit a draw or fade?
I think a little demo is required here. My back's getting stiff.
Look out. Yeah, exactly,
That doesn't take much anymore to get my back stiff.
I haven't done a full warm-up.
Look at that. That's a proper...
That was the extent of the warm-up, That's the extent of it. Best way to hit a draw or fade? Well,
there are loads of different ways, aren't there?
Yeah, I think I used to love the 9-shot box drill. Used to love it. Like low, medium, and high, for those that don't know. Low, medium, high, fade, straight draw.
Yeah.
The problem with, if you're saying it from the perspective of you want to try and hit both when you're out there, in the last 3 years, I've kind of come around to the idea that actually just have one shape and know your shape. And I think for anybody that plays above 5, probably, can just do with standing on the tee box, having one pattern that they can rely on and understand that even if they don't quite catch it, they're going to get the same directional curve. They're not going to get 2 different types of curve. So
that's the boring answer.
That's
what
the boring
about,
answer.
Now just tell us how to do it.
So, fade.
But I mean, very, very true.
I think
very true. Though. I know for my own game, when I'm not trying to do too much, it's probably when I score best.
Yeah.
It's when I try and be a clever dick.
Yeah.
When I mess it up.
Just stand on the first tee. If you're on a comp, and you stand on the first tee and you're thinking, I could fade, I could draw it. You've got to have a really clear intent behind the swing. If you're going to hit a fade, make sure you fade it. If you're going to hit a draw, make sure you draw it. But if you've just got one shape and you know that, it's just going to, I could get 8 yards of curve, I could get 2 yards of curve. But it's going to curve to the same start line and finish point within reason. In terms of fade or draw, there's a couple of ways you could go about draw. You could aim more right, play the ball further forward for the draw, potentially, and play more of like a pull type draw. Makes it a little bit easier to square the face up.
Is the danger of that strike low point?
Potentially.
That always,
so if
moving ball position, and I know it's something that plenty of people talk about. For me, just there's a mild alarm bell. Because
if you've got angle of attack to sacrifice, I'm like 6, 7 down all the time.
Right.
I could play the ball further forward and still hit ball first. If you lack a little bit of angle of attack, you could basically just do 2 things. I mean, the further up in the stance the ball goes, generally the more left path you're going to have.
For a right-hander.
For a right-hander, sorry. The
further back in the stance. Don't discriminate, Liz.
Sorry. The further back in the stance goes, the more into out. I mean, that's the same for either one. You're making me double think things now.
Oh, I know. You've got to be careful when you're online, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, so basically, normal draw, I would play the ball just back of middle. I tend to grip it a bit strong anyway, so that would tend to bring the ball back. Not great if you've got a weaker grip. And then I would always just make sure that I make a deeper turn for a draw, to be honest, because that would help me get the path a little bit more on the inside.
Great to get behind it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, let's see if I can actually hit one. So start's fairly neutral, ball further back, bigger turn. So that might pull draw, but got the shape.
Still got the shape.
Got the shape.
And then for the fade?
For the fade,
this one, a bit further forward.
Ball further forward, would reduce the level of the entire path. What was the path? Oh, we got the 2.
What was the path? Decided time out.
What was the
5.2?
5.2. Okay, right. So that was good with the path.
Yep.
But just turn the face over, and then fade, align a little bit more left. Same grip, not going to change that. Ball further up in the stance, and then hopefully turn more around it. I think that was a bit thin, but that should have the fade.
Oh, proper pretty little fade.
Yeah, I mean it was about 5 grooves low on the face, but sure.
It still works. I think because there was Langer did a piece where he literally just changed his setup and then swings the same, but that's for someone who puts the same swing on every time. I found it's quite hard. It's sometimes difficult to not overdo it.
Yeah.
So I find if I am picturing a shot, then basically because I'm picturing what I want the shot to do, I'm actually already partly almost computing. My body's already doing it. So if I then try and hit a draw, try and hit a fade, I end up massively overdoing the shot. So actually sometimes just really clearly picturing the shot you want to hit. Okay, you all might say, okay, that's nice, easy, just picture the shot and hit it. But
you live life in Neutralville. Your path is like 0 and barely ever comes off it. So it's super easy for you to go a little bit left or a little bit right.
Well, I've had to learn if I try and do it with path. So there's a very good friend of mine who does it with path. I have to do it with club face a little bit more. So if I change my path, I massively overdo shot shape.
Yeah.
So if I've got to keep my path neutral, and then essentially I'm slightly managing the club face.
Yeah.
And that's helped me minimise some of that. But you're also talking about if you're looking at shot shaping, that's pretty elite.
Yeah.
To do it, yes, Rory's just faded this beautiful 4-iron in from 240 yards out to about 6 foot, but he's one of the best players in the world. I think we watch them do it and go, I should be doing that, whereas actually
I think
being in the green's good.
So I had a client in last week, and he's a very, very good player, plays off +1, +2. And he said the biggest change that we've made to his game was giving him a consistent shape, and that's him playing off +1, verging on +2, and he's like, I know I'm going to draw it, so I don't have this fear of, I used to hit a hook, so I have to try and fade it. It's really just manage the nature of the curve you have. It's not always, I've got a big slinging draw, I need to try and hit a fade. It's like, just try and minimize it a little bit and make things consistent. And I feel like if you have one shape, life becomes so much easier. And it's just one less thing to worry about.
Right, we've got 15 minutes and a lot of questions, so we're going to but good. Very good.
It's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky because people are different, and generally the boring answer is just play one shape. That's the boring answer.
Boring, but it is true. Tony C, how much of a gain should I expect from upgrading from a 910 D2 driver to a GT? I had a demo and saw a gain of about 8 yards. Does 8 yards sound right, or should I expect more? If your original driver set up well, then essentially the middle of the face has been limited since 2003. So it's actually, you're not going to gain that much ball speed, but off center you will gain. If the ball flight is inefficient, you stand to gain a heck of a lot more. So if your current driver sets up and works well, I'll use my own driver as an example, and my M4, before I switched to TSR3, was set up well. I didn't really have an excuse of it not being. I gained about 5 or 6 yards, but off center I gained about 15 to 20. So a solid middle strike, that probably sounds about right, 5 to 10 yards if your flight's good. If you can't improve the efficiency of the flight, then ball speed's all you've got. But if the flight's off, then you could pick up 20, 30 yards. But if your flight's good, that sounds about right. Tom said Adam Scott has the DMR on a whiteboard. Yeah, a very strong swing, aggressive move. The neutrality of the balance with Adam's move makes a lot of sense. He's played KBS 130 shafts in the irons for a while, which are not overly tip weighted. So the stability with the mid balance makes sense for him. In Tony C, in last week's show, Nick said he's going to work on his driver in off-season. What will you gents be working on in the off-season? Oh, good question. Well, mine's easy, wedges, because I'm crap at wedges. Proportionally, I get low point issues. I shove the handle forward. This kind young man, for me, it's making sure that I can still create the shaft lead, but as long as I don't move forward. So if I move forward, the handle goes down, and I just fat it. So as long as I'm on the way down, making sure that shoulder goes that way, it regulates low point. And that then once I start to get strike more consistent, don't chunk it, then I can start fiddling around with flight control but just in the one round last Sunday, last Sunday actually played some wedge shots that were actually quite nice.
Oh, good.
So
good.
Yeah, amazing what lessons and a bit of practice does.
Yeah, I mean, yours was depth of low point, whereas I think, we had the chat where lots of people
digging
think about
the depths of technique. That's
yeah. Well, you kind of got the point of the low point relative to the ball, whether it's before or after. Most people think, if I fat it, I must have an early low point. The amount of people I have in upstairs who hit it super heavy, and they hit 4 or 5 down, have a 3 or 4 inch after low point, and they think, why did I catch one fat? Because I've got a 4 inch after low point. But actually, if the low point's too deep, then you're going to catch the ground even earlier, and TrackMan will still read it as a negative. So sometimes it's depth, sometimes it's position. It's always interesting. Yeah.
So what will you be working on?
The putting. It's always putting. It's shocker.
You had to think about that for a while.
Yeah. No,
you can tell. We both didn't have to think about it at all. So
my stats from putting are.
So what's the bit in particular that you've got to work on, or just putting?
I feel like pace control has got better.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of green reading and getting the ball started online.
Right.
But it's always, whenever I look back at my stats and I do a little bit on decade, and iron play is up there with PJ Tour, driving's good, lacking a little bit of yardage, but good.
Yeah.
Chipping is good
Average
enough.
Is about 310. Yeah.
I wish. But then putting, I'll lose remember one tournament I shot 2 over in one tournament. This is going back 2 years, and I distinctly remember it because I hit it so good. But I shot 2 over par, and I did my stats, and it worked out that I was relative to a PGA Tour player, I was dropping 6 shots.
Yeah.
6 shots just through putting. So it's not like it's even half a shot here, half a shot there. Shocker.
Yeah, for me with my putting, it's if my fundamentals get out, ball position, and then my chest opens up, and then I get out to win. And so I had to give myself a stern talking to a few weeks back, and
Basics.
actually it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the annoying thing. It's nothing complicated. It's just calibrating oneself.
Yeah.
But good question, yeah. Tom Ashmore, evening gents, dream team on the live tonight. Oh, so kind. They're very kind tonight. Looking to fill the gap between 4 hybrid and 4 wood, what head style would typically suit someone with a steeper angle of attack? Thanks. The hybrids, because they're a little more compact, allow you to trap it a bit more. The weight goes closer to the face. If you play a lofted wood and trap it, then the weight sitting further back kind of cuts across the back of it and flares spin. So the hybrid a stronger lofted hybrid, 3 hybrid, will keep the spin in check, keep the flight more controlled, and give you more consistent distance.
Sweet.
Chris Burgess again, can you hit the fly high 2-iron against TaylorMade equivalent and give your opinion? That one, just because we've got a lot of questions to go in the last 10, if we've got time to loop back to that, we'll certainly do that. Falcon 15, that's a good name. I like that. That sounds like something out of what's the that you're not going to remember. That's way before your time. It's a puppet-based program. Thunderbirds. There we go. I knew James would know. Just a quick thank you for the lesson a couple of Fridays ago with Lewis and clubs being regripped during and after the lesson. Many shanks later at the range. Good progress is happening. Cheers, guys.
Excellent.
We're glad there's progress. I mean, anytime there's many
sometimes.
shanks later,
got to get them out of the system.
That's one of those things where sometimes it kind of feeds. One feeds another because then we get tight and then but once you get out the other side of it. I remember I was away in the States one time and played around, was good, and then the following day just thought I'll just go to the range and just start to shank. And so I thought I'll go to a driver, and I nearly shanked a driver, and at that point I decided I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
And then next time I played was fine, but I just had to just.
Sometimes it can pay a brief visit and then go, but sometimes it's it can be down to a lot of reasons, can't it? But if someone's used to kind of managing it just off the heel, and then they change a slight bit in technique, and it just has to move that half an inch, and it's just understanding. Okay, if I do A, I get B, and the fix for B is X. It's just managing it. Like
sometimes standing further away makes you move into it, so it makes it worse.
You know what? Standing further away is one of the biggest reasons, because again, and actually,
weight tips too far forward.
Iona Stevens did a video with the TPI guys, and he has something similar. He was like, is it Greg, one of the TPIs? Is it Greg?
Yeah.
And she was standing miles away, and he was like, your early extension is just because you've got to find strike, and sometimes you can overdo it and shallow it out and kick it out further. It's tough.
Got a good one for you. Steve Darrington, Lewis needs a challenge. Any drills or tips on improving release and angle of attack with driver?
Very good.
Do you want to borrow a driver?
Sure. Yeah, why not? So release and angle.
Grab that and I'll take that cover off there.
There you go. Reread the question.
Any drills or tips on improving release and angle of attack with driver? So I'm assuming from a release point of view, I'm going to assume squaring the face. An angle of attack. I guess if you're down across and hitting a fade, my assumption is that's kind of getting it more on the up. And now this is not a good setup for you.
What loft is this?
8, and it's tip heavy, whereas yours is more evenly weighted, but it's heavier. Yours is heavier than that.
Good lord. So generally, one of the most common reasons for an overly down angle of attack and a lack of release is often someone who posturally for the driver, and this goes back, it's not quite ball position related, but someone who has their pelvis sat behind the center of their chest. So we almost see this kind of reverse pivot type effect, which can move low point left and make it very, very difficult to hit up. And the only way to really hit up if you are getting here is to thrust the pelvis across, lean back and try to create up strike.
Shirley Ballast will like that move.
It's a tough one. So it's a bit of a this way and then have to try to create it. The most common downswing from that backswing position, so chest to head of pelvis, is often just almost like an iron-esque release, because it will go more this way as opposed to being able to hit up. So I would check setup. So are you in a decent enough amount of tilt through your spine angle? And B, if you drew a plumb line through the middle of your sternum, does it fall just on the right-hand side of your belt buckle, trail side of belt buckle, trail side of belt buckle, or is that sternum on the lead side of your belt buckle? And if it's lead side, low point can move up, and that's very difficult to hit up from there. Whereas if you're more chest trail side, and then you try to maintain that backswing position, then it's much easier to hit up with rotation, good sequencing, and all that kind of stuff. So angle of attack is a sum total. It's not something you have to try to create. It's something which happens on autopilot.
As Shakira says, the hips don't lie.
Don't lie.
Always like getting one of those stupid comments in there. Mark Howard, can I ask what the profile is of the 5th gen Kurakage Silver 60 stiff shaft? Bought a stiff shaft as a new golfer and it's working for me, but I'd like to understand why. Thank you. So some of it'll be the weight, some of it'll be, so the stiffness of it and the profile is probably the least important part of it. The fact that it's working for you is that the dead weight and where the weight is within that shaft, and then when the club's built, the resultant balance. It's that all coming together to suit you rather than necessarily the profile of the shaft. The profile will give you, as in where it bends and where it's stiffer and softer, will affect feel. But the Silver Series Kurakage is generally a more tip stiff profile to the black historically. So the black is more of a softer tip, mid-launch, mid-spin. The silver is a mid-launch, lower spin, so more stable tip section. But the dead weight and the balance is why that will work for you rather than the bent profile. But great that you've got something that works. That's what we're, it's and my mind's gone completely blank. It's the thing at the end, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
There you go.
That wasn't quite what I was thinking, but it was close enough.
Well done.
Close
enough. Close enough.
Deary me. Daniel Winterbottom, hi gents. Have either of you tried the new TrackMan IO? I have seen it. It's going to be developing fairly rapidly in terms of the kind of data that they've got. I would say in a couple of years' time, the requirement for the behind the shot radar will be diminished significantly. But as they overlay, as they get more layers of info on it, and it's basically very good for restricted depth, where we've got the length of shot, we get the ball flight. Currently, that then gives better ball data and club data, and they have themselves said if you're fitting or giving lessons, the TrackMan 4 is still slightly better, but for home use, the over the top, the IO is great, but that will continue to develop and the data will get better and better and better. But you know, great product and definitely great for home use where you've got restricted space. Yeah. Golf Nerd 3, hi Simon, can you name a few popular shafts for wedges in the 120 gram range with neutral-ish balance? Thanks. So you've got KBS 120, the Tour 120 wedge, or the High Rev 125. Both of those, the Tour 120 is a bit of a higher balance than the High Rev. Interesting, in terms of neutral balance in the 120, quite a lot tend to go more in the tip end. So the Modus 115 wedge is a little bit more on the tip end. Any of the Project X shafts a little bit more on the tip end. So neutralish, the High Rev is probably your best bet in that weight range, sticking with the steel shaft for sure. Good golf coaching, Mr. Cartwright. Didn't drown in Spain, clearly. Obviously Mark's back, and I'm glad you're all back safe. Apparently a good trip. Loving the live chaps. Happy Monday from Portugal. Oh, you're still there? Oh, he's in Portugal now.
He's away for like a month, I think.
Just
away for ages.
So I thought you might be back at some point. But, we'll just have to zoom, I think, next time. But no, glad you're well. Glad you had a great trip, and hope you have a good week this week. We will catch up very soon. Tom, hi guys. Currently with T100 Project X, looking for something lighter and not as stout, like the KBS as a brand. Understand it's hard to say, but what shafts should I look at? I'm thinking Tour V120. Or the Tour V120 or the KBS Tour 120. You're dropping a little bit of weight, depending on what flex Project X you're in. If it's a 6.0, you're in a 125 gram. The KBS will make them swing a little lighter, be a bit more responsive. The Tour V is going to feel a little bit more stout. But if you want more kick from the shaft, go the KBS 120, and that would be a good one for more responsive feel. Thumbs up from Alan Hopkins. Peter Cantor retracted his message. Mr. Colin Caulfield, very long-term friend of Precision Golf. Hope you're well, Colin. What's your view of a hybrid versus a 5-wood, similar lofts? Hybrid will be lower, let you play it more like an iron. 5-wood will be higher. Max out carry, max out stopping power, but for some players gets a little bit high. hybrid, more like an iron, brings the flight down, but for some players the spin's a little low. So depending what flight you want, one versus the other.
Yep.
Different Simon to me, but Simon, what are your thoughts on lower compression urethane cover balls for swing speeds under 100 miles an hour? We're going to crack through these three very quickly because we're on the hour mark. Low compression does not create ball speed, so it's much more damaging to play a ball that's too soft at high speed than too stiff at low speed, because the ball's not loading and kicking. So actually, less deformation means more and less energy loss. So actually, it's a softer feel that you're getting, and you'll normally lose a little bit of spin with a soft core, rather than actually gain a load of ball speed. So think of it more of feel, but the urethane cover keeps quite a bit of the spin there. So think of it more that way around. Brandon Trotter, how can you tell if an iron shaft is too stiff? It's a feel thing. Normally, if you're going too stiff, it's too heavy. So look at the weight rather than the stiffness in that respect. But if your elbows hurt, it's too stiff. I'm going to do a couple, and then I'm going to have to end because we're going to be running out of time. But thank you for all the questions. We've got some over 100 watching tonight, which is brilliant.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for that. The left rough, great name. Can a quick transition player still play modus? Can a quick transition player still play modus 120? Yes. The balance goes into the tip. The handle will feel a little softer because you're transitioning quicker. You're loading the handle in a little bit more, so it might feel a bit weaker than some other shafts. The balance point in the tip could get it a little bit laggy on you, but it doesn't stop it being right. It is a case of just right shaft for the right player, no matter what your tempo. So it doesn't make it the wrong option. And then WFS01, hitting blocks and hooks with driver, too shallow, drills for getting less shallow. Quick one for less shallow drill.
Quick one, really, really easy, stood the test of time. Place a alignment stick in the ground. I would literally, whenever I get a flat, alignment rod goes in. Match the alignment rod at the angle that your shaft pitches at address. So you could do it with a 9-iron if you get a bit underneath playing with a 9-iron. It's just super easy. Or if it's too far on the inside with a club path aspect, place a head cover 2 feet inside and behind the ball there, just inside the target line. So you can't hit the head cover with a driver. But easy stuff.
Great stuff.
It's all based to rotation and that kind of stuff, but for the sake of time, those two drills.
Cool. There are a couple other questions, but we are out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for all the interaction. We do have, in a few weeks' time, our Christmas YouTube Live on Friday the 20th of December. It's going to be a great evening. If you want to come along, let us know. Come along to join. We've got space for 50, 60 people. We're going to have a DP World Tour player, an LPGA Tour player guest, and it's going to be me, Stuart and Henny. So we've got a 2-hour show. It's going to be great fun. We're going to have hitting challenges, questions from the audience, questions online. But if you want to be here in person, it'll be 6 to 8 p.m. on Friday the 20th of December. It'll be a great show. There'll be some nibbles and some drinks and all kinds of things. But if you want to come along, send us an email to info@precisiongolf.co.uk, James or Simon @precisiongolf.co.uk, or Stuart @precisiongolf.co.uk, and let us know, and we'll get you onto the list.
Sounds amazing, that.
It's going to be a good fun evening.
Sounds awesome.
You should come along.
Yeah, I might.
You should come along and chuck some bombs in from outside.
I will. Yeah, I'll stand at the back of the audience and just heckle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Been great fun to have you.
Loved it.
Great fun to spend a bit of time online with you.
Yeah.
And get the swing content as well. It's great seeing Lewis's swing. It's always picture of envy.
One pull draw left and one knife, 7 iron.
So you've got a busy week in the coaching bay?
Yep, busy week. Yeah, teach a lot in the bays upstairs, and a lot of online coaching. So I teach people in Australia, New Zealand, all over America, Japan, everywhere. Yeah, it's good fun.
Gets everywhere.
It's good fun.
As does Stuart. So thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. If you've liked the content, like, subscribe, watch all the videos on the YouTube channel. Let us know if there's anything you want us to do content-wise as well. Obviously, there'll be a load of reviews coming out in the new year on the new products, which will, by the time I can do that, we'll be allowed to talk about them. Thank you for joining us. Have an amazing week. I will be back here. Stuart won't be here next week because he's off sunning himself somewhere. But I will be back here with Nick, who was on last week, is hopefully going to be with me next Monday. And we'll see you next Monday, same time, 6 p.m. Have a great week.
See you guys.